In 1799, the French Republic was running on empty. A decade earlier, the streets of Paris had erupted with euphoric promises of liberty and equality. But 10 years of relentless war, mass conscription, and political terror had drained that early idealism. The people were exhausted. At the time, the country was managed by the French Directory. This was an executive council of 5 men, structurally designed to keep any single person from seizing control. But in practice, it created a permanently deadlocked and ineffective government. The directors were trapped. On one side, conservative royalists wanted to bring back the monarchy. On the other, radical neo-Jacobins wanted to return to the bloody, head-rolling days of the Reign of Terror. Every decision the Directory made was paralyzed by the fear of triggering either extreme. The very system built to balance power and prevent a dictatorship had become corrupt and exceptionally weak. The French people wanted stability, and they were finally willing to trade some of their hard-won liberties to get it. Enter Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès. He was an influential politician who despised the Directory and realized the perfect place to destroy it was from the inside. He began building a network of spies and bribed officials to execute a bloodless, strictly legal dismantling of the government. But Sieyès had a problem. He lacked the public support to keep the citizens of Paris from rioting once he made his move. To control the crowds, he needed what he called a sword, a highly respected military commander. He found his man in General Napoleon Bonaparte. Fresh off his campaigns in the Middle East and hailed as the conqueror of Italy, Napoleon had captured the imagination of the French public. He was brought in to provide the muscle. The conspirators drew up a precise plan. They gave themselves exactly 48 hours to legally decapitate the French government, force the creation of a new constitution, and do it all without firing a single shot. Sieyès thought he was hiring a useful, politically naive soldier to act as a shield while he restructured the nation. He completely misunderstood the ambition of the weapon he had just loaded. The clock started on the morning of November 9, 1799. Sieyès and his crew initiated the con by calling an emergency meeting of the legislature. They informed the lawmakers that a radical Jacobin plot to overthrow the Republic had just been uncovered, sparking an immediate panic. To protect the government, the conspirators convinced the lawmakers to pass a decree that would evacuate them from central Paris. They were sent out to St. Cloud, an isolated palace several miles west of the city, to hold their session the following day. This spatial shift was the core of the strategy. By moving the legislature out of the capital, Sieyès was physically separating the politicians from the Parisian citizens, deliberately cutting off their only source of physical protection. While the lawmakers were busy packing for the countryside, the conspirators dismantled the executive branch back in Paris. Through a combination of bribes, coercion, and sudden arrests, they forced the directors to resign one by one. By the end of day one, the nation's executive leadership was erased, and the legislative branch was trapped in an isolated box. Everything had been executed strictly by the book. The next morning at St. Cloud, all Napoleon had to do was walk into the isolated legislative chambers, explain that the Republic was in danger, and convince them to vote for a new constitution. But the brilliant military tactician froze in the political arena. He walked into the upper chamber and delivered a rambling, highly unconvincing speech. The deputies stared at him in dead silence. Seeking to recover, Napoleon marched into the lower chamber, the Council of 500. The lawmakers immediately recognized the military uniforms entering the room as a coup. They stood up screaming, labeling him a tyrant, and violently swarmed him. The legendary general who had stared down cannon fire turned pale and began to tremble. His own soldiers had to physically drag him out of the room to save him from being beaten, outlawed, and sent to the guillotine. The entire heist was unraveling. It was only saved by Napoleon's younger brother, Lucien, who happened to be the president of the lower chamber. Lucien slipped out of the palace and approached the military guards stationed outside. He spun a desperate lie, claiming that a small minority of corrupt lawmakers, bribed by English gold, were currently holding the rest of the council hostage with daggers. To sell the story, Lucien drew his own sword, pointed it directly at Napoleon's chest, and swore to his soldiers that he would personally kill his own brother if he ever threatened French liberty. That piece of theater did the trick. The troops marched into the palace and cleared the hall, sending lawmakers jumping out of windows to escape. Sieyès' carefully planned, entirely legal maneuver had failed. Salvaged at the last second only by raw military intimidation. Late that night, Lucien gathered the few remaining deputies who supported the coup. With no opposition left in the empty palace, they voted to officially dissolve the Directory and establish a provisional government. Sieyès believed he had won. He assumed he would now take his place at the head of the new government and write the constitution he had been planning for years. But he had made a fatal miscalculation. General Napoleon quickly leveraged his immense popularity and his absolute control over the military to outmaneuver the mastermind. Using the sheer force of his personality, Napoleon dictated the terms of the new laws, establishing the Constitution of Year 8. He relegated Sieyès to an early retirement and effectively crowned himself with absolute power as the first consul of France. In a matter of 48 hours, an exhausted nation willingly traded its hard-won democratic liberties for the promise of stability. The French Revolution was over, and the Napoleonic era had begun.